Hello, Renaissance artists. We're coming to you today from Ouray, Colorado. It is the Switzerland of America.
It really is. It's gorgeous. Look at this scene.
It's unbelievable. If you ever get a chance to come here, you have to take it. So today we are out scouting around for other locations, for other program. We do something special for you since we're here in the mountains. So that's what Jess is going to do here, just a little bit north of Ouray on our way to Telluride.
All right, yeah, that's about it.
That's it. Wraps it up.
All right.
Go.
All right, so what I've already done is I have done just a thumbnail sketch of this scene before me, and this is going to be a pretty simple format. I have an 8x10 square here. It's the same ratio as my canvas. This is an 8x10 panel, and I have just mapped out framing this in where my 1 through 5 different values. Down here is the number 1, and those are my darkest trees. Number 2 is this large hill right here. Then 3 is the hill behind it, and over here on this hill, about at the same plane, are the same darker values of that one. And then number 4 is the big mountain in the middle, and then number 5 is the lightness of the sky. That's my lightest light. So this is going to be a really simple painting of 5 basic values. So what I'm doing here is I've toned the canvas with a really thin mixture of burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, wiped it on, then wiped it off. Make sure that when you wipe it off, it's still a middle tone value. I've noticed on some of your plein air studies that you're getting this ground too dark, which is going to throw everything off if this is too dark. So make sure that this is like a nice, in the middle of the road value. So now just an inky mixture of sienna and blue with a little bit of Gamsol. I'm thinned it down and I'm going to draw on my canvas exactly where this is going to go in relation to what I've already done in my thumbnail sketch. So you'll see I'm holding my brush very loosely and at the end, and I'm always looking up at there and at my sketch. The thumbnail sketch is very important because it tells you how dark and light to make things. This is already your game plan, so you really want to hold on to this. So I'm looking too where these mountains are leaving the edge of the canvas. I don't want them coming right out of the corners. So I'm watching where all of those things, if you shoot people off the corners of your canvas, it's just really bad composition. So keep it about like that. I want this one maybe a little bit lower on this side and this one a little bit higher. Just makes it more interesting. Fades down there, and then in the middle here we've got this really big mountain in the middle. I'll have to figure out the names of all these, but you can erase your marks. Just that has some Gamsol on it, so I just rubbed it on, and I'm just working on the drawing of this a little bit more. Okay, so now I'm liking where all that is laying pretty much. I'll probably tweak it as I go along. And then this mountain back here, as it comes down, does this, and it swoops a little bit like that and goes into this valley back here. And then we've got, let's get this big one in. It comes around like this. And then it just sort of, there's some little ones back there. So let's bring this up a little more. It's okay to make those adjustments as you go along. Okay, so I am satisfied with that sketch and where I'm going to go with it. Get that in there, and this like this. All right, now going back to my bigger brush, and this is a size 6 flat bristle by Signet. Actually, I'm not going to use the Gamsol anymore except to clean my brush, so I'm taking just the smallest amount of linseed oil, and then I'm going to start with the sky first. So grabbing my white, and I'll just get it right into that. Oh, there's still some Gamsol in my brush, but that's okay. I want that a lot lighter, it's too dark. I'll use this blue for some of this bluer patches of the sky up here. And I'm just looking at the general direction that the clouds are flying in today. Just gonna lay down bold, strong pieces of directional paint, just like that. So grabbing a lot more white, maybe a little bit of yellow ochre just to get some of these warmer patches of clouds in here. Paying very close attention to where my composition is. And I don't need a whole lot of paint up there, but kind of just enough to move it around. You don't want to be too stingy with your paint either. I like to really lay it down. So and you see sometimes I take my brush and I twirl it on the palette. That just kind of gets the extra paint off that maybe I don't want to wipe off on my paper towel because it's still good and I'll use it. So I just twirl my brush on the palette to get it off. Now the reason that I toned the canvas before I started was because it gave me that middle tone value range already so that I can sort of lay in my values a little bit more accurately as I'm going along. And sometimes I get in the habit of laying the paint down too thick in the sky and then it doesn't have that soft, whimsical, airy feeling. So there's just that happy balance between too thick and too thin. Okay, so I'm stepping back. Every now and then you'll see I pretty much leave the canvas. It's because I'm looking at the whole picture to see how that looks with the sky in the background. What I'm going to do is take a teeny bit of cad yellow light into my white, and I can see I'm going to need more white on here. Smallest amount of cad yellow will give you a really white, sunlit looking white, and I wanted that back in here. I'm kind of twirling my brush a little bit just to get that exact color of those clouds. I may even take a little bit of alizarin crimson with that to give me sort of that peach color that I'm seeing in there. It's about 3:30, so the sun is kind of threatening to leave us as it goes around behind the mountains. So we're sort of getting some of those colors in the sky. Okay, I think that's fine for the sky. I don't want it to be too distracting, so I'm done with this. So I'm going to set my thumbnail sketch down and getting a little bit smaller brush. I'm going to work on this mountain. So this is really just all I take with me. I'm going to grab my size 4. This is a synthetic flat, and I like this because I can get a nice chiseled edge on it. So leaving my palette as is, I'm going to add into the colors that I already have here. So I'm grabbing some burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, and I'm squinting way down to get that mountain in the middle. And this is my value number 4. This is 5, my lightest light. Now I'm going to the very next one, and believe it or not, colors are often lighter than what you think. What you want to do is compare. I'm looking at that big mountain and comparing it to my darkest dark in the painting, which are going to be these trees in the foreground. So by comparison, if I lay down this color, how does it compare to those darks? Always jumping back and forth to look to see, should I lighten it a little bit, maybe a little bit more blue? I did add a little bit of alizarin to that just to give me that soft sort of lavender, Purple Mountains Majesty thing going on there. Okay, so with a nice crisp chiseled edge, I'm always flicking my eyes back and forth to that mountain in the background. And I have plenty of paint on my brush, and a little bit of linseed oil will make it a little bit thinner. You don't want to go nuts with everything because it can be, as you've probably learned, it can be really difficult to start to manage if it gets too goopy or starts running away with you and things like that. These mountains over here, way off and the farthest ones away, I am going to add a little bit more white to those just to help them look like they go way back. Way over there. Okay? If I squint down, way down at those mountains, I don't see all the little subtle changes in the rocks and everything, so I'm not going to paint them that way. I'm just going to let my brush strokes define the form of that mountain and just leave it at that. So I'm looking again at the contour of this one as it comes around. There's this nice angled structure to this edge as it comes down like this. Maybe a little more alizarin. Let's get some pretty purple in there. I really want to push these colors as I see them just a little bit more because you can't be super literal with your painting. You know, as you've learned, you have to move things around and adjust where trees are going to go. Your composition of this is the most important thing, and the way you arrange these values. So I'm going to make a little bit darker purple, alizarin and ultramarine blue for this side of this mountain because it's not getting so much of the sun. And just about like that. Getting on my Bob Ross, happy little mountains. I paint them just like that. So, what would it be without mentioning Bob when painting mountains? Okay, so there we go. As I'm working my way down into the shadow here, I have added a little bit more alizarin, blue, and sienna as it's coming this way. And I'm still trying really hard to keep it in this number 4 value range because as I move forward, like I said, these are going to get darker and darker. I don't want to start too dark because then it's going to be really difficult to gauge. Down in here. I'm going to add a little bit more white down in here just to make it look like the atmosphere is down there inside all these mountains. We drove through these canyon roads to get to this area, and it is absolutely the most majestic drive I have ever been on. So that was just magnificent this afternoon. And this morning we were on this road. I have added a little bit more yellow ochre into this, still keeping it in the same value family, but it is reflecting a little bit more of the natural light as it's streaming through that background area. I want some of that in there. Like that. Okay, so, and that's all you have to do for those kinds of mountain ranges like that. Just keep it really simple. And I just saw, I didn't get really fussy with it, just big, bold strokes. All right, now, cleaned my brush off. It's all nice and clean. I have my paper towel in this hand. You probably can't see it off the camera, but it's here. So now I'm gonna work on my next darkest dark as I move forward into this canyon this way. And that is this number 3 value. So I'm right into the pile that I already have here. Oops, I got too much blue, but that's okay because I will be using it. Still gonna go with this violet family, the alizarin and the blue, and then I'm gonna add a little bit more burnt sienna into that. A little more oil, and I think I'm gonna grab some more yellow ochre. It just gives it a little bit of green. Now I'm gonna test it and see how close I am. That's too dark. So adding a little bit more yellow ochre and white to that. Let's test that. Okay, that's much closer. Little dab of oil. Let's go back up here and fix my If you paint thick enough, you can cover right over the top of any mistake you make. So now people have been asking about edges, and you can make an edge, or in this case a mountain, appear closer to you by making the edge a little bit sharper than what's directly behind it. So keeping my brush strokes clean and sharp. Another reason I like that chiseled number 4, that chiseled synthetic brush. As I move down this contour of the mountain, the values down at the bottom really pretty much get lost in the haze of this valley. So I'm just grabbing a little bit more yellow ochre and white right into that mixture as I move down. I didn't even clean my brush off, just went right into it. And a little bit more darker as we get right in this area. I just want to separate this ridge from that background mountain. Letting those colors mix together on the canvas. It's okay, you don't have to mix everything clean and perfect on your palette before applying it to your canvas. Sometimes it's okay to let those colors just mix right on the painting. Alright, so there's that yellow ochre and lighter mixture down there. Always squinting down at that will simplify everything for you. Alright, now this was also a number 3 according to my thumbnail sketch, so I'm going to go right into what I already have here for this other side. Again, keeping that edge sharper in front of that back there, the big mountain. I'll just make another big pile of it. Burnt sienna, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue. And if it's too dark, I can add more white. That's too dark. A little bit of linseed oil will make it easier to mix on your palette. Just the tiniest drop. Again, always checking back to see if I should adjust the contour of this edge. A little more yellow ochre into that. Let's do some yellow ochre and sienna as we move down this mountain, because as we were driving into here, a lot of these are called the Red Mountains, and there was this really beautiful sort of ochre color that we saw so much of as we were driving through. So I want to get some of that. The sienna and white. Again, I'm using my brush to define the form of that mountain. Stepping back, checking everything. I'll add a little bit darker blotches in there for the trees as I see them in there. Some of these up here a little lighter. So that's what's happening with these spots that I'm leaving open. Okay, so now these little darker areas, I'm going to grab a little more sienna, a little more blue, getting that nice mixture going in there. What happens there? Oh, that's good. It's still in the same value family, pretty much. So let's just lay that in. I think I should add a little more blue to that. Just to really, yeah, it's too dark. I like that better. I still think all of this in here is too dark. So I'm going to just wipe my brush off, grabbing a little bit more yellow ochre and sienna and white. And I really just want to kind of paint in some atmosphere down here. See how all these values down here are really close together? I like that appearance more. Lots of motorcycles. Bringing this color down over here a little bit. Okay. Stepping back. I'm stepping way back now from my painting to look at it, just to see how everything's reading. I look at this and nature all the time, flicking my eye back and forth, squinting, not squinting, and all that. All right, so now I'm going to work on this big hill here as I see it, just grabbing more of that blue, sienna, yellow ochre. That might be too dark, but let's see what we've got. I want more sienna and alizarin in there because I'm seeing some of these darker rocks having that iron color that we've been looking at and admiring all day. So pretty. And I'm going to streak in some of those lighter colors too that we see in these rocks. And when you're painting rocks, keep your brush angled and straight, vertical, horizontal type strokes like that. And I'm painting the rocks first because I'm going to be painting trees around them. Just like when we did that very first landscape painting and we painted the rocks, then we painted the trees. It's the same concept. So I'm just going to suggest some more of the rocks in here before I start painting the value of the trees in place. Alright, now I'm going to do the trees. Cleaning that off, I'm going to grab a new paper towel. Oh, and I do have, you know what, before I get into this anymore, there's a little hill down here that I want to get. And that has a little bit more yellow ochre in it. It's a little darker than this number 3 value, but I want to suggest that. And I don't plan on using too many colors. Most of the colors so far that I have used in this painting have been what I call the Trinity, just these 3 main earth colors, the ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, and yellow ochre. I will use a little bit of the other colors as I go along. But those are the main ones. Alright, and I'm going to grab just a little bit of the ochre and white in here just to give it some interest in that place. Okay, now back to this big hill. Grabbing that ultramarine blue, little oil so it's easier. Let's get some yellow ochre in there. And you can see, just paint the colors together. Sienna is, of course, in the red family, and when you add it to your greens, it takes on sort of an olive tone, which is nice, and it makes it look more believable. So I'm going to paint these trees in here, and I'm not thinking about them as individual pine trees, but as a mass. And I'm looking at the way that this mass comes down the mountain. And around these rocks. The worst thing I could do at this point would be a little tiny dab, dab, dabbity dabs for the trees. Don't want to do that. It just doesn't look that interesting. So always be squinting and it'll simplify everything and your painting will reflect more of a unity that way. Let's grab a little bit of yellow, cad yellow in there just to get some of that feeling of trees, especially as we come down here into the valley and it starts getting lighter, more atmospheric, I see more of that cad yellow down there. And still, I'm being careful not to let this dark get too dark, because down here is my number one dark value. So I'm going to add a little bit more white to this, these dark green leaves down, trees down here. A little bit of cad yellow. Bringing that into that area a little bit. And it's okay if some of my canvas shows through, as long as it makes sense. If you tone your canvas, say, in like a magenta, and it starts to shine through, it might not make sense. Although I have seen people do that, and I know one lady has done that, and that's how she always tones her canvases, with magenta. And she does plein air landscapes. And there's sort of this interesting wild electric feel that goes on with her paintings, and for her it works. So if you want to try that later on, as you start feeling comfortable with getting out there and plein air painting, by all means. This is all just, it's like a playground, and if I could just encourage you to enjoy yourself and play, and just put it down there. You can always scrape it off. You can always start over. They make more canvases if you mess it up. No big deal. So enjoy yourself. That's what this is all about. Okay, so I'm content with this value stepping back. Cleaning my brush off, I'm going to start to get some of these down in here. Now remember, I talk about more and less. Everything far away is less attention, less contrast, less strength and color and brushwork. So as we get up close, I'm going to get more contrast, more colors, stronger brushwork, all of that in here. So cleaning my brush off, going to make a nice dark green, and so that's ultramarine blue, a little bit of sienna. Let's grab some ochre. So far I have not used my Viridian, and I would encourage you to avoid it if you can. That is only there for maybe mixing with a teeny bit of your cad yellow to get a really bright spring green. Now all I'm doing with this really dark green here is going to be placing in where I want these dark trees down in the foreground. Everything else is going to be a brighter tone, like a springy green. I'm not painting that RV in there. I don't know if you can see that, but that would definitely be an eyesore. So that is about as far as I'm going to take the dark there. And you can see, even just for these trees, I've laid my flat, I've laid it vertical, and I'm just kind of letting the edge of that brush show some form that way. And I'm going to take some cad yellow right into that blue and some of these mixtures, and I'm letting the colors underneath here sort of mix and play in and around what we're doing, because it all has a sense of unity and will work together that way too. So I'm starting with a darker green here, keeping this in my number one value, the darkest dark. So I've got a dark green going here. I will add over the top of this a brighter spring green, but for now I'm building up the layers, still while working in the same value family. Cad yellow, ultramarine blue, and then whatever was underneath, that'll be brighter in there too. And then there's like a knoll that comes up that I thought was interesting, so I will get that in there too. Now I'm going to start grabbing some of those brighter colors. So clean my brush off, grabbing the alizarin, or it's cad yellow over here. Let's get a small touch of that phthalo green, the smallest amount. It is really strong and you don't need very much. And just paint those two colors together. Let's see what that does. Okay, but see how by just adding that bright spot, all of this now comes forward and that goes back. So you have to be very careful that you don't overdo it. And I'm going to let some of those colors mix and play with the color that's underneath it in there. And this is my grassy knoll color here. It's just yellow ochre and a little bit of that cad yellow as I had it on my brush. Let's get some more oil because it flows off the brush better. Let's get some brown in there. That just makes it feel like this is all foreground that's closer. And I'm just using a little bit of yellow ochre, sienna, white, and some of the blue-green colors that were on my brush. Just letting those play and mix. A little bit of white here, grabbing some of that cad yellow in there, just to add a little bit of textural and value variety to this foreground. Remember, it's nearer to us, so it'll have more contrast, more interest, more colors, everything like that. Looks okay. All right, now I think I'm just going to touch up some of these trees here just a little bit more and wrap this up. Let's get cad yellow and ultramarine blue. I just want a little bit brighter green just to show some of the different kinds of foliage in here. Pop in some of those darker greens that got a little bit lost. Like that. And I'm kind of thinking about a vignette idea here too, and I would like to have these not be really distracting as it comes off the edge of the canvas. So maybe let's pop in a few down here just to keep the viewer in the picture. Like that. Some variety here. Before I get too far going, I just want to put a little bit more atmosphere behind these to really make them pop a little bit more. And that is just that sort of a gray mixture that I had on my palette that I'm just grabbing to paint around these objects. Okie dokie. And that about wraps that up.